Good morning, everybody. So my talk is the Greenway Journey, and I've only got 15 minutes, so it's going to be a pretty quick journey because the project's been going on for 20 years. 25 people have signed up to come on the Greenway Workshop this afternoon, so we're going to get on the light rail and head down to Lewisham West and have a walk along the section of the Greenway. Apparently it was sold out in less than 24 hours. Which kind of depresses me a lot because I love taking people for walks along the Greenway, but we really can't take more than 25 this afternoon. So maybe there's an option to kind of tack on another Greenway walk after another Fit New South Wales seminar or something. I'd be happy to do that because I'm very happy to take people for a walk along the Greenway. So as is often the case with these projects, it was the community that first came up with the idea of the Cooks River to Iron Cove Greenway back in the late 1990s. And there's several Greenway champions here this afternoon. I can see Fiona smiling and Bruce at the back and several others. And we've all been on this journey and we are getting there. We're fairly confident that the shared path component of the Greenway will actually be completed by 2021. So it's taken us 22 years. So back in the late 90s, one part of the community saw the value of this corridor as an urban wildlife corridor connecting the Parramatta River with the Cooks River. And the second part of the community saw the value of this corridor, which is nearly 6 kilometres long, as a missing link in Sydney's regional cycle network. So the community groups put the ideas together and started knocking on doors, beginning with the 4 councils through whose areas the corridor goes, and then eventually the state government. And as I said, we have had many highs and lows over the last 20 years, but we are getting there. So this is the corridor in question. The bit that I'm focusing on is the yellow section. One of the things that makes the Greenway corridor quite significant is that the Inner West Light Rail runs down the middle of it. The first part of the light rail was the red bit, and that was built in the late 90s, and that basically connected Central to Darling Harbour and the casino. And then, as many of you would know, because you've probably been on it, in fact a number of you probably used it to get here this morning, the Inner West Light Rail was built on the old Rozelle goods line down the yellow section of the corridor from Leichhardt North down to Dulwich Hill. And then the blue bit at the top, of course, is what we're all waiting for, which is the light rail down George Street to Circular Quay. So when it's all connected up together, it's going to be a fantastic contribution to Sydney's mass transit network. This is the actual Greenway corridor that I'm focusing on this morning. It's just under 6 k's long, and it connects 6 urban villages. So you've got Haberfield and Leichhardt in the north, you've got Summerhill and Lewisham in the middle, and then down to Dulwich Hill and Earlwood down south on the Cooks River. And there's lots of kind of good things for the community within this corridor, as well as the light rail, of course. You've got Hawthorn Canal, you've got half a shared path, the northern section from Iron Cove down to Parramatta Road, and it's the southern section that we've been trying to raise money to build for so many years. There's a bunch of parks, playgrounds, tennis courts, netball courts. We have 16 urban bush care sites along the corridor. Most of them were established by the community and are still looked after by the community with help from council staff. There's a couple of cafes, there's a sprinkling of public art, and there are also 22 primary schools along this corridor, and I'll come back to that in a minute because that's a really important part of the story. And not surprisingly, because it is an important corridor, there's a lot of growth proposed to occur. Between 12 and 18,000 new homes over the next 25 years is what we anticipate. Bays Precinct in the north, Parramatta Road in the middle, and Sydenham to Bankstown corridor down south. So what we're doing with the Greenway is obviously not just with the needs of current residents, but with the needs of future residents too. Now, not surprisingly, Because it's a regionally significant corridor, it appears in a number of plans and strategies. Probably the most important for us is the draft Eastern Sydney District Plan, and the green lines are the green grid. Our Greenway is recognised as the #1 priority green grid project in the draft Eastern Sydney District Plan. And the fellow who's in the photograph with the helmet on, some of you will know him, that's Rod Simpson. He's the Environment Commissioner at the Greater Sydney Commission, and he joined us on a bike ride about 18 months ago. And one of the reasons that the Greenway is the #1 priority project, as Rod says, is because it's got every single thing you want to have as part of the green grid. And I'm sure some of you will be familiar with the green grid. So community involvement has been a really important part of the Greenway from the very beginning. And we were delighted to win this award last year from the Greater Sydney Commission for great community-led project. The lady stood next to Lucy Turnbull, who's the Commissioner, is a woman called Jennifer Kent, who is the Secretary of Friends of the Greenway, which is a group that was formed about 7 or 8 years ago to campaign for funding for the Greenway. And Jennifer and many other members of the Friends of the Greenway have donated hundreds of volunteer hours to the Greenway cause. And I think the citation says it all. This unique level of community leadership and engagement is one of the principal reasons why the Greenway vision and program has endured for 15 years, despite various setbacks. So this is an important photograph. The 4 people in the photograph are the 4 general managers of the 4 councils whose areas the Greenway goes through. And we finally got them to sign up to fund the Greenway a little bit each for 5 years, because up until then, each council had said, well, you can have a little bit of money, but there's no guarantee that there'll be money next year. And as many of you would know, it makes it really hard to achieve anything when you never really know whether you're going to get funding from one year to the next. So they've signed up for 5 years for these 5 elements of the Greenway program, which I'm responsible for as the Greenway Place Manager. And in the various talks that we've had this morning, we've touched on all these elements. And so it's kind of encouraging to see this is just another case study of what we're all collectively trying to do here. So the first part is placemaking and place management. The second part is sustainable transport, particularly completing the shared path. Urban bush care, art and community culture, and then the fifth one is sustainability education. So that's using the Greenway as an outdoor classroom. So placemaking and place management, this is probably the most important place along the Greenway. What it looked like back in 2010. I should have said that the light rail was built on the old Rozelle goods line, which has been in place for 100 years. And this was typical sort of rather tired commercial spaces either side of what was effectively a redundant goods line. This is what it will look like by 2020, a complete transformation. 1,500 new apartments, 2 hectares of new open space, approximately 6,000 squares of new office and commercial, a new 500-metre section of the Greenway, the light rail stop, of course, kind of an activated plaza. So a complete transformation. So the actual missing links. Now, when people stop me in the street, kind of this is the top of mind question. So they say, so Nick, when are you going to complete the shared path thing? When are you going to complete the bike path? Just under 3 k's of it is in place. We've got another 3.2 kilometres to build from Parramatta Road south to the Cooks River. In a whole combination of links, the overall cost is about 25 million, which sounds a lot for a section of bike path, but when you're retrofitting it through an established urban area, it's amazing how costly that can be. So we secured funding, finally, from the state government about 18 months ago, and a little bit more came through about 2 months ago. So we now have $25 million in the kitty, and the council is also contributing. So we're into design and construction, and we hope to complete the Greenway by 2021. And I always say that the Greenway is a lot more than a 3-metre wide concrete bike path. It's a whole bunch of things which provide a range of social, economic and environmental benefits. This is just the central missing links between Parramatta Road and Old Canterbury Road. That's a couple of images that the Government Architect's Office did for us when we retained them a couple of years ago to do the concept design for the central missing links. And then moving on to bush care. So as I said, we have 16 bush care sites along the Greenway. This is one of our earliest and one of our smallest, and there was a couple of kids from the local primary school who came to help us plant it up, and I managed to get them back 13 years later. And this really kind of gets me here. When I see this, I think this is actually what the Greenway is all about. So the bush has grown, and so have the kids. And you cannot imagine how many texts it took me to get those two down there. Well, those of you who have teenagers in your life would understand. I have 3. Lots of texts in our family. Moving on, community arts and culture. Now, there's only a minority of people who are interested in cycling in Sydney, because why would you? It's too dangerous. And even fewer are interested in urban bush care. On a Sunday morning, haven't you got better things to do? But most people are interested in art, culture, heritage, local history. So recognising that, we established this part of the Greenway program about 10 years ago, and our signature event is the Greenway Art Exhibition, and this year is our 9th year. When we've got some money, we try and commission public art, like the image on the left of the screen, and also because it's an urban corridor, there's a fair sprinkling of street art going on along the corridor. We also have environmental art. This is our 4th year for something which we call Art on the Greenway, and it's actually up at the moment. It will be up until next weekend, so if you live locally, please pop down. It's where the Greenway hits Iron Cove and the Bay Run, and these are just ephemeral works which we commission, and they're installed for a couple of weeks only, just next to the shared path. And then there's the primary schools program, which is a really important element, because as I said, there's 22 primary schools along this corridor and a fair few high schools as well. And so for about 10 years, we've been taking groups of primary school children for an all-day walk along the Greenway. And they learn about sustainability in their local neighbourhood. Because so often, environmental education at schools is you kind of pop them in the bus and you take them to the Royal National Park, and then you come back and forget all about it for a year. So the idea of these Greenway walks is that it's their patch that they're learning about. Also, we have a primary schools active travel project, which we're doing with 5 schools along the Greenway. And we all know that Sydney's great in January because it's school holidays and the streets are quiet. So that's really what this project is all about. So what we're trying to do in various ways is encourage more of the kids in these 5 schools to walk, cycle and scooter to work. So that's a really interesting one. So those are the elements of the program. This is what we're actually facing, if you like. And I mean, this is an urban corridor. So, you know, it's not that, sorry, I'll just go back. It's not that pretty. As the people who come for the workshop this afternoon will see. So this is the canal, and water quality in the canal is pretty poor, and the ubiquitous trolley and plastic bottles, of course, appear. Contested open space, there's a lot of community demand on this corridor, and of course, from time to time, people kind of get in the way of each other. Whether you're walking the dog, you've got a kid on a tricycle, or you're queuing for your coffee at Cafe Bones, which is in this image. You can get quite a lot of conflict in those situations. Also, there's 4 very busy roads which cross the Greenway east-west, and this has been a major headache for us, trying to encourage people to get on bikes and to walk along this corridor, and they're confronted by these 4 busy roads. And as you'd expect in the inner west, you know, there's a fair few creepy public places, and so, you know, we, through a variety of placemaking projects, are trying to address those as best we can. So this is probably the ugliest spot on the Greenway. This is called Battle Bridge, which is a very apt term, really. And it's where Parramatta Road crosses the Greenway and Hawthorn Canal. And it's a mess. There's no other way of describing it. And there's a reason for it being a mess. It's because it's the area where 6 agency boundaries meet. So on the left-hand side here, you've got what was a footpath owned by Ashfield Council, now the Inner West Council. On the northern side of Parramatta Road, the footpath was owned by Leichhardt Council. Parramatta Road itself, owned and operated by RTA and then RMS. The light rail which crosses Parramatta Road at this point is owned and operated by Transport for New South Wales. The land on the eastern side here was owned by Marrickville Council, now Inner West Council. And the Stormwater Canal, Hawthorn Canal, going under Parramatta Road was owned and operated by Sydney Water. And the community was trying to get a bike bridge under Parramatta Road at this point. And it's no wonder that it has taken us 17 years before we should really make progress. And when we were listening to the gentleman earlier talk about those 21 agencies that they had to deal with up at roads, I really feel for you, because it kind of does your head in. And the community just says, well, why can't they just get their act together and do it? Why can't they? We're paying the taxes. Anyway, if we get it right, I reckon that the Greenway will be Sydney's equivalent of the New York High Line one day, but it'll be longer and there'll be more things going along in it. Thank you.